Azeroth's Skies. Act 1, Chapter 4. Pets, Magic, and a Whole Lot of Light. Written and read by Terrabreaker X. Embarrassment, fear, and shame were just a few of the emotions running through Fluttershy's head as she barreled her way through the streets of Stormwind, desperate to get as far away from the park as possible. The occasional concerned guard looked her way along the roads, but she passed them too quickly for them to ask what was wrong. She ran and ran and ran until she simply couldn't anymore. Eventually, she ground to a halt, doubling over to catch her breath after the physical effort she just committed to. As the oxygen flooded back into her system and she slowly calmed down, she realised she'd made a terrible mistake. She'd run without a clue where she was going, and certainly not back the way she'd come. She was very, very lost. Panic threatened to overwhelm her, but she kept going. Sitting down and waiting wouldn't solve anything. She tried to retrace her steps, but the canals were like a maze to her, and she couldn't find any helpful signs. I think I'm just going in circles. Oh, no. What do I do now? She thought. She thought about asking one of the guards for help, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. The plate armour, their enclosed faces, they were just too emotionless, too intimidating. She didn't dare approach them. Continuing on regardless, Fluttershy found herself staring down a tunnel that didn't seem familiar, but then if it wasn't one she'd seen before, it could very well be a different way back into the trade district that they started the day off in. Taking a deep breath and steeling herself, she started to walk through it. She emerged out the other side into a world of noise and shouting. The very air seemed thicker here, heavy with the smell of burning and of smoke. The whole area seemed somewhat darker than the rest of the city that she'd seen, even on such a bright morning. A horrible smog hung over it. This clearly wasn't the right way. She turned to go back out the way she'd come and slammed straight into something big, tense, and yet oddly soft. Dazed, she fell to the ground, rubbing her head. Then she slowly opened her eyes and came face to face with the angriest bear she'd ever seen. "Muzzle! Damn insane bear! Watch out, miss. He can be a wee bit testy in the morning," someone shouted, but she could only half hear them. Suddenly, the whole atmosphere of the place seemed to brighten for her. Oh my gosh, he's so cute! The black bear barely had time to raise a claw towards her before she moved, stroking its back with one hand and tickling its throat with the other. It calmed down immediately, and within moments she had it rolling on the floor, wagging its tail with its tongue sticking out. "That's incredible!" This time she heard the voice clearly and turned to its owner, and presumably the bear's owner too. He was short, much shorter than any of the humans that she'd seen so far, but stocky, and he had a thick, bushy ginger beard. He stared at her in shock as she reduced his friend to an affectionate mess. "I've never seen Muzzle act like that with anyone. You have a special touch, miss." Fluttershy couldn't help but blush deeply. "Oh, I don't know about that. I'm just really good at working with animals." The short person raised an eyebrow. "Oh, where are you from?" She couldn't give him an answer to that, and panicked. What could she say? Well, I She tried to copy the others and say, "Sorry, I have amnesia," but she couldn't spit it out. He seemed to guess that she wasn't too great at speaking to strangers, and shrugged. "Doesn't it matter? My name's Thorfinn. What's yours?" Fluttershy? It was easier to speak when she focused her attention on the bear, but she didn't want to seem rude. That's a funny name. Alright, Miss Fluttershy. You just might be able to help me with a little problem I'm having. See, Muzzle here isn't my pet. He belongs to a friend of mine. He doesn't like me, though. Always tries escaping. Now, you seem really good with animals. I can tell that just by looking at you with him. Think you might be able to help a foolish old dwarf out and give me some pointers? He said dwarf like it was what he is. It didn't seem like an insult, she thought. And those tall, scary people with purple skin from before. There must be lots of races on this planet. It was a bit of a struggle keeping up with his accent, but she got the gist of it. She wasn't too sure about walking off with a stranger, but then again, everyone here was a stranger. She couldn't just run and hide away in her home like she normally would when things got scary. Her house was a little too far out of reach, after all. She had to go and make more friends, and this was an opportunity to do so. She realised suddenly that he was waiting for an answer. I'd be happy to, she said at last, standing up from stroking the bear. But I've managed to get myself a little lost. After we're done, could you show me where the trade district is, please? First time in Stormwind, eh? He nodded sympathetically as he pointed her down the street at one of the houses. Yeah, it's a little confusing. I'll be happy to. Now, we'd best get moving. I had a cuppa brewing when I came out to let Muzzle stretch his legs. Just about made it back in time. Twilight stood outside Trius' shop, looking up at the clock tower. It was in the centre of the canal system, but it was quite visible from most of the city, she'd found. She'd made a note of the time that she'd left, and had come back exactly 4 hours later. Those were nice girls, she thought back to the new friends that she'd just made in the Mage District. They were all a little younger than she was, but were all mages themselves. They turned out to be students of a powerful wizard. His name was Malin, and after giving the other girls a talking to for being late and setting them some tasks, he'd poured some tea and sat down to talk with her. She'd fed him the same amnesia story that she'd told everyone else, and he had replied that it wasn't uncommon in Azeroth, then spent the rest of the time she had free trying to refresh her memory, which she'd taken as an excellent opportunity to learn more about the world. She'd learnt a lot, especially about their magic. Some of it seemed quite similar to what she was familiar with, but the strangest thing was that humans didn't need horns to cast spells here. It seemed that anyone could do it, if they had a certain spark. Malin had told her that it was quite certain that she had that spark. He offered her the chance to study with him at the tower for a time, and they would see if they could work towards getting her memory back too. Hopefully, access to the castle library would help jog it as well. She had hastily accepted, her eyes dancing at that last part. Their time was up, so he'd sent for one of the girls, Suzanne, the darker redhead, to take her back to the trade district. They chatted all the way, and then waved goodbye to each other at the end of the street. My first new friend here, she'd smiled to herself as the mage had disappeared off towards the tower again. I hope Princess Celestia will be proud. Looking inside the cheese shop, she saw Pinkie Pie waving happily to her from behind the counter, and nodded to Elaine as the older woman caught her eye and held up 5 fingers to her. The meaning was clear. 5 minutes. Twilight! She turned at the sound of her name to find Fluttershy hurrying towards her. Twilight grinned as her friend skidded to a halt in front of her, panting for breath. Looks like you're a little lighter on your feet now, Fluttershy. Great job. Oh dear. I'm not late, am I? I got a little sidetracked. Oh, I'm so sorry that I ran off on you earlier. I didn't mean to worry you. It's okay, Fluttershy, Twilight interrupted. The former Pegasus seemed close to hyperventilating. We've still got a few more minutes, and I'm just glad that you're okay. Did you have fun? Fluttershy calmed a little and gave her signature shy smile. Oh, yes. I met some of the nicest dwarves, and they had this beautiful bear. They said I'm welcome to come back any time. Dwarfs? The word flashed into Twilight's mind. Malin had listed it as one of the races in the Alliance. That's great. I met a few girls. They turned out to be mages. You know, it seems that magic in this world isn't that different from back in Equestria. And once she was off, it was almost impossible for her to stop. Fluttershy listened patiently, nodding at the right moments. Not too long later, Pinky burst out of the shop, jumping into a hug with the two. She wants to hear all about what they got up to, but it would have to wait. Elaine was waiting for the two inside. With that, she skipped off down the street. She's amazing, that Pinkie Pie, Elaine commented as the two entered the shop. She's a natural saleswoman. Elling's not going to believe today's figures, and we're not even halfway done. The two giggled. Yep, Twilight said. Pinky sure is special. Pinky jumped up and down atop the battlements of the little keep, shifting her gaze all around her. She'd asked Elaine where she could buy some treats, because everyone knows that Pinky just loves sweet things, and sharing sweet things, and double sharing sweet things, and triple. There was a gnome, apparently. He sold ice cream, strawberry ice cream. He would normally be in the trade district, but apparently today he was visiting his cousin, who wandered around the canal with a cart. 2 gnomes. She just had to find them. And how better to find them than to look from a high-up vantage point in the middle of it all? Elaine had given her an advance, just so she could get some of the frozen treat. How nice is she? I know, right? Ma'am? She felt a tap on the shoulder, and turned to see one of the guards in full plate speaking to her. How did you get up here? Oh, you know, Pinky giggled, giving her biggest smile. Just looking for a gnome or two. The guard smiled awkwardly back, and was about to say that didn't really answer his question, but she'd spotted her target. Aha! And with that, she was on the keep no longer, leaving the guard standing around and scratching his head. 5 minutes later, and she was slurping down the biggest strawberry ice cream cone she'd been able to buy. The gnome had assumed that she was dressing up for something, given her hair, and had charged her only half price. How nice of him! These people are all so nice. Where do I go next? Maybe I'll look for the others, or... Her nose twitched. Wait! I hear singing. She hurried towards the source of the noise, heading down a few streets until she was within walking distance of a giant, pointy-roofed building with beautiful stained-glass windows. The singing was coming from inside. I've got to investigate. The door was open, but she'd been a little too slow. The sound trailed off as she walked through, to be replaced by the droning hum of a mass of people talking. She emerged into a giant, brightly lit room, where rows of seats stretched towards the back of the building, and a blocky, cloth-covered rectangle sat atop a tiered platform. And in front of that stood a group of 8 people, all dressed in white robes. Each carried a book in their hands. We are getting there, my friends, one of the 8 said joyously. His robes were more opulent than the rest. He had a grey, scratchy beard and a naturally long face, but his eyes spoke of warmth and hugs and light and warm fires and just a few more tries from the top. Oh my gosh, they're going to sing again. Oh, are you going to sing again? Pinky was beside the man suddenly, and he jumped. The others looked startled too. Can I join in? I love singing so much. I'm sorry, miss, but our rehearsals aren't open to the public. I'm afraid you'll... Oh, is this a private party? I just love those. They're the best. Well, except public parties, they're even better. I just love how you can use so much more confetti and streamers and banners and everything at a public party. And, I mean, you can get so much more singing in as well. And the more people that sing, the better it gets, until you just get this huge mashing together of sound and people and fun. And the laughter's the best part about it all, because when you're laughing, you're having fun, right? I'm sure you guys know that. You're having a party right now, aren't you? I don't know, though. It could use a lot more confetti and streamers. How's this? She twirled around, jumped into the air, and landed on her knees. The air exploded in a burst of confetti, streamers, and other party equipment. They all gaped at her. I, the big hat man stammered. Archbishop Benedictus, look! My hand! The finger I cut at the start of the session! One of the other men in the group gasped loudly. I remember. What of it, my child? She healed it. There was a flurry of movement as the group closed around the man with the injured finger. She could hear them whispering. Didn't even cast a spell. Remarkable. What was in that confetti? She frowned. Didn't they like the confetti? Maybe I should go. The whispering stopped abruptly. The group took one last look at her, and then 7 of them departed, scurrying off to different adjacent rooms in the building, and leaving only the man with the glitzy robes and the big hat. Forgive me, my child, he started slowly, a small smile on his lips. But I do not believe we have ever met. My name is Archbishop Benedictus. He reached out his hand. My name's Pinkie Pie. Nice to meet you. She grinned happily, shaking his hand vigorously. Well then, Miss Pinkie Pie, what do you know about the holy light? Rainbow Dash sighed as she stalked down the streets. At least she wasn't tired. Being on standby had let her go straight back to sleep, and she'd never be up before 10 in a normal situation, much less like this. Normally, she'd just find a nice cloud to lie down on, tuck her wings away, make sure the breeze was just light enough, and then she would snooze. Waking up to the sun shining overhead was the best thing ever. Of course, this wasn't a normal situation. And I don't have my wings, she thought. She'd wanted to stay and sleep some more, but Elaine had forced her out. The day's not meant for staying in bed, the woman had barked. Go get some fresh air. Rainbow looked up, gazing at the sky. There were a few clouds here and there, none that would have been too much trouble for her to handle back in Equestria. She imagined how she'd deal with each one, shift them round in the sky, and all she could think about was flying, or her wings. Every few steps she felt the instinctual urge to jump up, like the wind catcher, and just take off. But I can't, she thought. Not anymore. What's a Pegasus pony without her wings? Heck, I'm not even a pony anymore. What are humans even good at anyway? I guess the hands are kind of useful, and that's about it. I could run faster back home. I could fly. Without my wings, am I even awesome anymore? She sighed again and continued walking around the canals. She had no idea where she was going and didn't particularly care. And suddenly, a pink blur dashed off to her right, and she tracked it out of reflex. Years of living with Pinkie Pie had trained that into her. And sure enough, there went her pink-haired friend, zooming into a passage that led past the signpost that said Cathedral District. What's a cathedral? She thought. Oh, never mind. Hey, Pinkie, wait up! She shouted, but went unheard. She broke into a run and followed her. Rainbow had been athletic as a pony, and it seemed to have paid off in this body too. Racing against most people, she suspected that she'd do pretty well. But Pinkie was Pinkie, and she didn't count as most people. Rainbow counted herself lucky that she at least managed to catch a glimpse of her friend before the latter disappeared into a large building, one that took up the majority of the square. Is this a cathedral? Rainbow hesitated at the door. Even though it was open, she doubted Pinky would have stopped outside anyway. But no, it seemed that it was supposed to be, so she cautiously walked inside. The majority of the building turned out to be one room, a vast, tall, echoing hall. Rainbow paused at the edge of it to watch Pinky introduce herself to a group of men and women. She found it difficult to stifle a laugh as the pink-haired girl broke into a monologue that ended in her showering the rest in party materials. "Benedictus's recruits get stranger by the day," a deep voice rang out, and she jumped. A man had come out of a side room in front of her and had seen Pinky's performance too. He was tall, decked out in gilded silver plate armour that glinted in the light. An eye patch covered one of his eyes. The other appeared a fairly standard brown. Most impressive, however, was the massive, shining hammer that he carried one-handed, almost like it was nothing. The man looked her over properly and smiled. "I'm sorry. A friend of yours?" Dash looked back to Pinky, who now appeared deep in conversation with a man in brightly coloured robes with an oddly tall hat. Yeah. How'd you know?" The man shrugged. "You both stand out." "Oh, yeah. Well, I'd best be on my way. Wouldn't want to keep you." She turned to go. "Really?" the man asked, and she stopped. "I thought you might be here for the display. You certainly look like you'd be interested." "What display? And why'd you say that?" "Some of my paladins are putting on a demonstration of how they've progressed in their training. It's open to the public, as we're always looking for new recruits," the man replied. "From the way you carry yourself, you look like you've received some military training." She hadn't even thought about that. "I guess all that time with the Wonderbolts must have made me stand up straight here," she thought. Yeah, I guess so, kinda." She was still tempted to just leave. She didn't know what a paladin was, and wasn't particularly curious. And yet, I've got nothing better to do. Maybe this will pass some time. "All right, I'll stay," she said. The man smiled and held out a hand, which she shook. "Excellent. Lord Grayson Shadowbreaker, at your service." Rainbow Dash. Nice to meet you." He nodded and showed her into the room he had first come out of. There, 2 men and a woman knelt down, each in front of a crudely made wooden dummy with a straw face, their heads bowed, eyes closed, hands clasped together. Each had a weapon sheathed over their backs, a sword, a hammer, an axe, and yet they did not seem inclined to use them. 2 minutes passed, and Rainbow was starting to feel like this was a mistake. They're just sitting there, not even doing anything. They just... Whoa! Her jaw dropped. As one, the 3 trainees rose up and drew their weapons. They opened their eyes, which glowed white-hot like the sun, a glow which spread down their arms, to their hands, and then onto their weapons. Rainbow could feel the warmth radiating from them across the room. It was a feeling of belonging, of being welcomed. Faster than she would have thought possible, they brought their weapons down and cleaved through the dummies. Slashed, crushed, hacked. The result was the same all round, splinters everywhere. Grayson went to each trainee in turn, whispering quiet words of praise and encouragement. They each bowed and then left the room. She didn't know what to think. The light had faded so quickly, but for the brief time it had shined, she felt like there was nothing wrong with the world. Just for a moment, she hadn't felt the ache of her missing wings. Just for a moment. "Well," Grayson had returned, and was looking at her intently, with a wry smile on his face. "I'm not going to exaggerate, but that was awesome," she cried. "The way they crushed those dummies, that light, so much warmth." Indeed. You speak as if you're not familiar with the light. Have you never come across it before? Oh, well, Amnesia, Rainbow, amnesia. Twilight's voice flooded her head for a moment. I had a bit of an accident. I don't remember much apart from my name. In that case, maybe I can help to refresh your memory. Would you like to hear about the Holy Light? On the one hand, it sounds like he's going to talk a lot, Rainbow thought. I've never been that great at learning stuff like that. On the other hand, I've still got lots of time to kill today, and the memory of the feeling of the strange, comforting light flashed through her again, and her mind was suddenly made up. I'm listening, she said.